Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our 31st video session with Impaction. Today, we're going to hear from the student group from the University of Washington called Impact. But before we start their presentation, we would just like to introduce ourselves and what we do at Impaction. Essentially, we are aiming to inspire and support people to create a positive difference in their local communities. The purpose of video sessions is to connect people around the world so we can learn and support each other no matter where we're situated. So like I said, today we're going to be hearing from a university-based senior, Shaurya Jain, and a couple of members from his team are also on the call. So I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves in 2 sentences or less. I'll start. I'm Shivani Choksi. I'm one of the co-founders of Impaction, and I'm based in Chicago, Illinois. Sukanya, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Sukanya, and I'm based in Dallas, Texas. Well, you want to go next?
Maribel.
Maribel, I couldn't hear her. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Maribel Rodriguez. As it relates to Impaction, I'm a social enterprise cohort leader through Learn Serve International, and I created a project called Love for Immigrants, showing the value immigrants bring through visual narratives.
Thank you. Galyani, do you want to go next? We can't hear you.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Kalyani. I'm currently working as a freelancer and a UX designer for Impaction team.
Great. Thank you. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Sarah Khan. I'm a member of the community for ++ at UW Seattle.
Great, thank you. And Vaish, I'm sorry.
I'm Rashad. I'm also part
Yes.
of community committee for Impact++, and I'm also based at the University of Washington in Seattle.
Great, thank you. Shaurya, I'll give a brief introduction and then you can introduce yourself in your own words. But yeah, we will be hearing today from University of Washington-based senior Shaurya Jain, the founder of Impact++, a student-run organization that aims to foster a community of social good on campus. Shaurya will be speaking to us about their mission and how student-led clubs centered on technology can help organizations and ultimately people. Shaurya, do you want to introduce yourself and the work that you do very briefly before we move on to the presentation portion?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I'm a senior at UW. I started a club called Impact++ about 2 years ago. And yeah, the goal is just to kind of like get students to work directly with nonprofits and leverage their tech skills in some way to help these organizations out. There's like a lot of different ways that we try and do that. As like the club matures, we're trying to just in general build a community at UW around this. So like we call it the intersection of technology and social good. And yeah, so that's kind of what the goal of the club is.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. If no one has any questions or comments as of now, we can just move on to the presentation portion, if that works.
Cool. Let me share my screen real quick. All right, you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so like I said, the club is Impact++. Our main purpose is to foster a CS plus social good community at UW. It's not really just CS, it's more just like anything technical that kind of helps with software products for the most part. So that can be design, it can even be like program management. It just depends on what that looks like. But we try and connect students with projects where they can work directly with nonprofits, right? So there's a couple of different ways we do that. I guess rewinding a little bit to like just how we started. Um, when I was a sophomore, I was looking for a project where I could work directly with a nonprofit, and like I basically reached out to Microsoft Hack for Good, which is this internal Microsoft organization where they try and get employees do work on projects with nonprofits. And I kind of told them that, hey, like I'm a student at UW, I'm studying computer science. I'd love to work on one of these projects, and they were super interested in like just helping me out and like finding me a project. And so I eventually found a project, and I just got a couple of my friends together, and we started working on it. And we worked on it for about, I think, 8 months. And we were just trying to learn about like how this kind of like structure would work, where you had students working with these like mentors essentially at Microsoft, who were kind of like helping us build this product out. And we learned a bunch of different things. And eventually we realized that like in general, when we talk to people about this project, there seemed to be a lot of interest at UW, from the student side and also from like the Hack for Good side at Microsoft. And so we just decided to start a club around this kind of stuff. And so I think the club itself has been active for like a year and a half now. But yeah, that's kind of how it started. Eventually, we took up some more Hack for Good projects. And so like right now we have 3 Hack for Good projects we're working on. So like the Grace Children's Foundation project, the King County Air Support Unit project, and Internet in a Box. As the club matured a little bit, we also tried to like kind of explore different ways of like how these projects could be structured. So like, for example, like Open Data Kit is essentially just like an open source project that we're contributing on. And like the Low Income Housing Institute is like this other project where we directly approached a nonprofit, like just the student team, and we're basically trying to like scope out what their needs are. And I think like the scoping out is mostly done at this point, and now we're working on actually building them a solution. But so there's like no Microsoft mentors or like any other mentors involved in that project directly. So we're like trying to like explore these different like ways of working on these projects essentially. So I guess like I can go into detail on like how these projects are structured. So for the Hack for Good projects, for example, the first one, the KCSO unit project, they essentially have like 7 helicopters, and they do all of like the aerial activity in King County, and they just have like a data problem. So like when they go on these flights, it's really hard for them to capture all of that data. And so we decided to build a web app for them where they could like easily log stuff and like aggregate information, and just like make their lives easier. So that's like the goal of the project. There's like the way we work on it is I think there are like 6 developers right now that are basically just so there's like a program manager who essentially works on, again, like scoping out different tasks and figuring out like what exactly we're trying to build. And then he kind of like distributes tasks amongst the developers who try and do them the best they can. And like if they have questions or anything, like the idea is that you have resources to reach out to. So that's like kind of how we try and structure our projects. I think the biggest issue that we have for the most part is attrition. So this is like volunteer work, this is nonprofit work, and in general, like when we have students work on these projects, they work on it for like a short amount of time, and then they like different priorities or like whatever kind of creeps up, and like a lot of the times we kind of like lose that initial like investment of like helping them ramp up. And we do a couple of different things to kind of stop that. So like the one thing we do is like we try and make expectations really clear when we're recruiting these students about how long they're going to be working on a project and like what is expected of them in terms of like a weekly commitment. And that kind of like helps, like make them understand also like what goes into working on some of these projects. And we also ask for like a 3-quarter commitment essentially. The idea behind that is that it takes a couple of quarters to like actually ramp up and get to the point where you like know enough to be productive. And so like usually it takes like a quarter or maybe even 2 quarters, and then at least you have like some time where you're being productive in the project. And the goal here is that it's a mutual goal, right? Like on one end, we really want the people who are working on these projects to like understand these technologies, just learn more about like how this stuff works. And on the other hand, like for the nonprofit, we obviously want to be productive and like actually deliver things. Um, does that all sound good? Am I being clear? Do you guys have any questions or anything?
I have a question about the commitment. What do you mean by it? So do you ask them to sign a contract, or is it a verbal commitment?
It's just a verbal commitment. There's no contract involved. But like we've essentially had like these recruiting rounds. We've had like 2 or 3 at this point, I think. And so when we interview these students, we try and like make it really clear what they can expect from the projects, and we also ask them a bunch of questions about like how available they are, like what their schedule looks like, just to like kind of gauge if like this is going to be one of their priorities or not. But it's just a verbal commitment. We don't. It's like we can't really like hold them to it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Cool.
All right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I would like to know on what parameters you recruit students to
Yeah.
these projects.
Yeah. So there's actually kind of crazy, but like the interest at UW for working on this kind of stuff is insane. It's like our first recruiting round, we had like 65 applications, and we were only recruiting for like 14 spots on the projects. The second round was also like similar numbers. And so it is like kind of hard for us to, like narrow down on who we want to give this opportunity to. And a lot of that goes down to like we're trying to like just manage these projects so that they're not like people are being productive to some extent. And so like that takes a lot of resources and like time from our end. So we can't just like have everybody work on these projects, at least right now. In terms of like how we decide who gets to work on this stuff, we try and interview as many people as we can. So like the first recruiting round, we literally interviewed 65 people in like a week, which was crazy, and like it is not feasible to do that like every single time. So like the second time around, we had like this basic application where people wrote like why they're interested in doing this stuff, and then we kind of narrowed based on that, and then we interviewed like 25 people or something. The main things we ask for in the interview, like it's not so much about like your technical prowess. Like we don't really like care if you've worked on 1,000 projects before or whatever. We essentially look for like do you actually care about this kind of stuff? Are you are you motivated? Do you have the time to work on the stuff? We look for people who've had experience with like learning things quickly in the past, because like that's usually a pretty good indicator of whether or not they'll like stick around for the project. Just because like the initial ramp up period is like you're just learning a lot, and like a lot of that is just by yourself often. And so that's kind of something that we look out for. And yeah, we also like the goal is to give everybody who wants an opportunity an opportunity. And so the way we do it is like if you've applied previously for like another recruiting round or whatever, you're like that much more likely to get in on a project. So we do like kind of go down the list. It's not that like we basically try and find everybody a spot as far as possible.
Interesting. I'm just curious to know, can you explain like any one project, like how you recruited the students, what kind of work they did, how long it took and everything? Or just like to understand, because many students find it difficult to balance between their studies and other activities that they do. So I'm just curious to know how long you've been doing these projects for, and the work that has been involved and everything.
Yeah, sure. I guess I can continue with the KCSO project since I've already described the objective. So that was like I think the first project that we took on. so I think like over the last 2 years, we've had probably like 20, 25 different students work on this at different points, but the team is always like around 6 students long. So the way it works is you have like a mandatory 2-hour meeting every week. And so you show up to the meeting and you kind of like work collaboratively with the other people in the room. And the goal there is that we've realized that like if you're just like if you like dedicate at least 2 hours of your time to this, then like this is something that like like stays in your mind as something that you need to do. Which is why like even when we're recruiting, we make it clear that you kind of have to make that mandatory meeting every week. Other than that, we basically ask for like roughly like 6 to 8 hours of work from a student. And so what that usually looks like is like if you probably have like a task assigned or something, and so you work on that during your meeting, and then you work on that like I don't know, like the rest of the week whenever you have time. And yeah, like students definitely have trouble in terms of I would say that like we probably average like maybe 4 hours from the people who work on these projects every week. But it's like it also like varies just based on the week since we're a quarter system. So like some weeks people have like midterms or whatever, so they won't do anything. Other weeks it's like chiller, so people will do a lot more work. So it just kind of depends. Cool. Should I move on?
Any more questions, Suganya?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, go.
Okay, cool. Cool. So the Impact Innovation Challenge, this is the other big thing we do. We did this like last year for the first time, and it was like relatively successful. But it's basically like a social good hackathon. The unique thing that we kind of tried to do last year was instead of just like setting up another hackathon where people kind of show up and work for a day, we tried to make it more relevant and useful, and we tried to make it so that the projects would continue like after the hackathon. This is a couple of ways we did that. We essentially like formed like a little research group of students, and we tried to talk to a bunch of nonprofits just like in the Seattle area that worked on the issues of housing and homelessness and like health and safety. And we tried to like figure out what their needs were and like how they thought that they could leverage technology. And we made up these like one-page problem statements that we gave out to people who showed up at the event. And the idea is like they could like read those problem statements and like they would have like a more like clear understanding of like what these issues actually look like. And they would hopefully come up with better solutions. We like ran into a couple of issues with that. So like we only had around like 2.5 months of like actual planning time for the hackathon. And so like we weren't able to get like a lot of amazing problem statements. But like from the ones that we did get, for the most part, they did like a pretty decent job in like getting people just acquainted with these issues, I guess. So that was cool. And like I said, like the point was to continue these projects after the hackathon. So we had like a bunch of like mentors walking around and stuff, and like the winning prizes were essentially like the top 2 winning prizes were like 24 hours of like Cisco engineer and like product manager time. And the third prize is also like you got to go to this like company downtown, and they would basically spend a day working on the project with you. So like their marketers, their finance people, their engineers, whatever you needed help with to like continue the project forward and make that like one big push. That was like the idea behind all of this. Unfortunately, that's not quite how it turned out. But like it was like the first year, and we definitely like learned a lot from the experience. So the goal again, we're hosting another hackathon this year in May. And the goal is kind of similar, where like we don't see this as like a one-day thing. We just see this as like the beginning of like an idea or of a project. Yeah, so that's our hackathon. Do you guys have any questions around that?
what happened? What happened instead? You said that that's not how things turned out. What happened instead?
Well, just in terms of like getting the projects to actually continue. So we there were like a couple of projects that like survived for a small amount of time, but I think the annoying part is that like so the hackathon was in May, and so right after the hackathon got over, we basically had finals, and right after finals got over, it was summer. And so like all of the momentum that was built up was like snuffed out pretty quickly, just because like finals in summer tend to do that. So that's like something that we're thinking about and we're trying to like plan for this year. So this year our theme is basically like environment-based stuff. And I think we're just gonna try and do a better job of like picking teams to some extent and also like motivating people to continue with these projects. Because I think the Cisco Prize was cool, but it wasn't something that like it required like extra effort from like both sides. And so I don't think that it was like utilized to its fullest. But it was, I guess it was like the first iteration, so we're still learning. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. That makes sense.
Okay, cool. So I guess
About hackathon. So I remember during the hackathon, you also organized some small sessions where people were going through their company, their details. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like every after 2 hours, there was a small session.
Like okay, yeah. So we had a couple of different speakers. So one was this company called Giving Tech Labs. I was actually going to talk about them a little later, so like I'll just push that to then. There was another person from Microsoft who spoke. Was basically a Microsoft employee, but he's really passionate about working with nonprofits. So like at any given point, he's working on like 5 different projects, and he just had a lot of experience with like kind of this. This is called like skills-based volunteering. And so he has a lot of experience with getting people to work on these projects, making sure that like they're productive to some extent, and like he understands like the incentives in the space really well. So that was a pretty cool talk. I'm trying to remember who else we had.
There was one guy who was related to the AI.
Yeah, so I think those people are the Giving Tech Labs people, right? Is that, I might be wrong.
I wasn't clearly able to recall, but yeah, I remember, and I really liked that talk, and I like the idea of putting those talks during the session.
Yeah, we were just trying to like again like broaden people's horizon in terms of like how they perceive this industry, almost like the nonprofit sector and like these projects. And so we tried to bring in people who like had some experience with like the different aspects of all of this and just kind of have them talk. I don't remember specifically what the AI one was. I think I am forgetting like a speaker or two. I can look at my notes after this.
Yeah, that's okay.
Or yeah, so that's like one thing we did. We also had like this I think developer workshop where like people just kind of like learned some like basic web development skills. That workshop was pretty popular, just because like the kind of like the easiest way of how people approach these problems at hackathons for the most part is like they build like a website or a web app of some sort. And so that was pretty helpful. And yeah, I'm trying to think of what else we did. Yeah, I don't know. If something comes up, I'll talk about it. But yeah, do you guys have any other questions about the hackathon?
No, I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
Cool. Future goals. So yeah, like we're just trying to. So we kind of have like these two big things now, right? Like we have the projects where we get people to work with nonprofits, and then we have like this big hackathon where we kind of like reach out to the broader community and We just like talk to them about what this field is. But like we wanted to expand that this year in terms of like we're looking for different ways where people can engage in this kind of stuff. And that's actually where like Rishabh and Sarah come in. So they're both on the community committee, and like the sole goal of that is that like just finding new ways for students to engage in this field, like this intersection of technology and social good. There's like a couple of different ways we're thinking about this. So like one is like this discussion series thing that we're actually going to start next quarter. I think like Sarah and Rishabh can talk about that a little more if they want. Yeah, do you guys want to talk about that really quick? Like
Sure.
Stuff?
Sure. Yeah, I can go over a little bit of it. So basically what we were trying to do is expand Impact++ into our community. And we were thinking of two primary ways of doing so. The first of which is, as Sharia mentioned, sort of like a discussion series where we bring in students around campus and we have some sort of a speaker to come talk about some key like aspect of how technology can be used in the social good space. But also what we were thinking of doing is creating a workshop series, particularly towards CS education, targeted towards high school students. And we're trying to break the traditional stigma that computer science is just for, you know, making money, trying to go work for the big companies. It can also be used to create positive social change. And we're trying to do so by first, you know, bringing a group of students together at UW and then bringing in certain speakers, professors, instructors around campus who we feel will be able to communicate and teach our students how to teach CS to a group of students who don't really know about CS. And so based on this little workshop series, we hope to conclude it by going to a high school in the Seattle region and giving a little workshop about a certain topic that we have learned to teach. And basically the goal of this is to not only create awareness for computer science as, you know, an academic domain, but also its applications in the social good space. So we're really trying to bridge and create this intersection of CS and social good in sort of a way that isn't usually thought about.
Yeah, and we're trying to raise community awareness, especially around that. So obviously there's this huge stigma, as Vishal mentioned, and we're trying to deconstruct that by having these workshop series where we're able to reach out to the public, and that's our central goal while we're doing this with the CS Education Workshop series that we're hoping to start up in winter quarter. But we're also looking in the future for other workshop series regarding other themes, and we have come up with other themes such as low income house aid or even politics, and we're still like trying to figure out where we want to go from there and figure out how we're going to take this and make it something that applies and helps the public, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to craft it. But for right now, our first step is making this CS Education Workshop series.
Yeah.
Any questions so far?
I have a question. So how do you think you can create this influencing curriculum? Would it include all your past project work and everything, or are you planning to come up with something extremely new that would be focusing on the future projects or ventures you guys would like to take on?
I think to answer that question, it's sort of like there's like two facets to it. The first of which is, you know, the method through which we teach the students. I guess the way to do so is first we have to understand how to teach the students. So the primary focus for the workshop series is the first bit is going to be from lecturers on campus who have been trained specifically for teaching computer science. So we'll begin basically our workshop by teaching UW students how to teach effectively in a manner that will inspire the students. And so first, when we're going out to the high school students, we'll talk to them about like asking them, like holding discussions about what they think computer science is, and then we'll sort of educate them on how, like, a little basics. We haven't confirmed exactly, a curriculum that we're going to follow, but based on that, we will show them how to start these projects, and then to inspire them to continue further. Of course, we will bring in examples of what Impact Plus Plus has done. Always try to make it like motivate them to go further and show them, the endless possibilities that we have.
And I think that this is actually for the whole club Impact Plus Plus with that goal of influence curriculum. So part of it, I believe, is that part of our curriculum is centered around the academia and the application towards jobs, especially regarding computer science, but we haven't considered the social good around it. And that's something that this club is dedicated to talk about and to bring awareness of. And part of it is, yes, these workshop series will help with that, and we're also playing the speaker series, but we're trying to really get the public involved in any way possible so that they can see that this is more than just a sort of field that's really technical. It's a field that could have broader implications on society, and we could use it to better to change our society for the better, if anything, and help ourselves grow, if anything.
So is the curriculum going to be designed with the help of your professors and everything, or it's going to be done by the students, and that's mostly student-led projects? How is it going to be designed actually?
So just to clarify, go ahead. Actually, Michelle. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So we were thinking primarily over this winter break, we will reach out to particular lecturers and professors on campus, as well as the links with the high schools, and talk to them about how, like, what would be the best method for us to communicate to these high school students, because you can directly go there and talk about, this is like the CS principles that we're going to teach you. This is where we're going to get to. But it has to be like a process. Like, you can't just dive in and hope for them to all stay interested. You have to sort of take a particular path. And I think you're asking about, like, curriculum. Just a clarifying question. Do you mean like the curriculum for teaching the UW students, or teaching the high school students, or a mix of both?
Both.
Both. Okay, so for the students, we have like a week-by-week plan, and our goal is for the first couple weeks to create student groups, and then within those student groups, they'll discuss what they think the best ways to teach CS are, because most of these students have already taken the introductory programming classes, so we sort of understand, coming from zero background, how to actually learn the very fundamentals of programming. And so we have a little bit of that background ourselves, but to make sure that we're going the right path, of course, as you mentioned, our mentors will be, older students, other professors who will come and try to guide us and showing us, what is the best way to teach. And a lot of us have prior experience in high school, running a lot of clubs in which our focus was to teach other students and communicate to large groups of people. So trying to merge all of these together, I think it'll be a unique set of talents to, communicate to these students. And for the curriculum, I guess we'll start out these, talking to these high school students by first showing them what they can do with CS. What can Impact Plus Plus, what we've done, show them, breaking those barriers. And then from there, we'll teach them, very basic fundamentals. We haven't decided what language to teach. Like, we could either go a web development route, like HTML, or we could go like something like Scratch or JavaScript, or even like Python or something like that. Something simple enough that we can teach them in a small period of time, but still showing them that there's a lot of possibilities with that language. And those skills that they've learned, and that it's applicable in other areas. But primarily, it's just to create awareness. That's the goal here. We're not teaching a full class. We're not teaching them every step of the way to finish their projects. It's sort of like getting their feet wet so they're motivated to continue further in the field. Something like that.
Yeah, and also I'm thinking that when we're going to when we're approaching these high schools, especially, to be able to not only teach the concepts themselves, but tie in what's the importance or like relevance to it to society. So that's one of our goals with what we're going to have. We're going to have to teach the students to talk about within however they approach their teaching, is to consider those issues and present them as well as the concepts themselves when they're talking to these students. So obviously we're still unsure of many plans. We still have like a whole timeline to really hash out and everything, but it's but we're planning to really get through it over this winter break and hopefully start at winter quarter where we really know what we're really good with. We have good communication with all these professors, and we really know what we're going to expect in terms of how we're going to approach UW students and how we're going to even teach them to teach and so forth on that.
Okay. So do you have any specific programs in mind that would focus on promoting more girls to shift to technology through your future goals?
I can speak to that. So I think like right now with the discussion series thing, this is just still really new. So the idea is we're just going like week by week. Oh, sorry, quarter by quarter. So like for now, for the next quarter, the general goal is just like CS education. So we're not really, I don't think we're focusing on women in tech at least. But it's kind of like this thing, like the idea is that this can be a quarter by quarter thing, and like we can come up with a new goal every quarter and kind of like figure out how to like get people involved as and when we do. So yeah, I guess no specific goals right now, unless I'm wrong, Rishabh and Sarah.
No, I think that's a good way to put it. It shows the flexibility of the program. We can target specific topics, specific issues as we move along quarter by quarter. So even if this quarter isn't primarily focused on women in code, there's definitely opportunities while we're marketing this to also target a wider range and create diversity within the field. And that's also one of the goals of using this CS education, the whole like workshop. Maybe we can look at it from this point of view, even though it's not targeted specifically towards girls in coding from the point of view of the UW students. Perhaps the whole educational awareness we're creating at these high schools will inspire more women to consider computer science as a field that they want to explore. It's just this idea of creating awareness, both in the college level and in the high school level.
Yeah, and a part of it also comes down for like this specifically for this workshop series about which school we decide to go or which schools we decide to go and teach these concepts to, because we need to also keep in mind of the population and what their limitations are and why they especially need to know about this. So for instance, schools from low income areas might be something that we're considering. And a part of it, just like all these projects and all these discussion series, we might be talking about CS education, but it also relates to all these other aspects that kind of come more implied within the broader field of CS education. Does that make sense?
Yep, I got the clarity. Thank you.
Yeah, I think those were like awesome questions. And like we hope to like basically like answer them better in a couple of weeks as we like roll this out. But this whole like idea is super new right now. So we're also like trying to figure out like what this is gonna look like for the most part. But that's just kind of what we're starting with. We want to make this relevant for the people we're helping, but we also want to make it relevant for the students. And like teaching is something that like a lot of people are interested in. And like it's something that like if you invest a little bit of time in, you can like improve yourself a lot at. So that's the idea behind it. Yeah, do you guys have any other questions, or should I like go over the other goals? Or
Yeah, you can go
I
ahead.
have a question.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. So I was wondering, well, I love your ideas of teaching students as well as continuing to like be an advocate for seeing the link between CS and social change, which is really unique. I have some ideas as to like questions you can ask yourself and the team throughout when you're building the teaching for the high school students. And I think the main one is, how might I make any problem that we're trying to solve with students, or any activity that we're trying to do, into a game. I have a friend whose business is around creating games for organizations, and when I teach, it sometimes can be hard to engage high school students, and that question has dramatically shifted the way I work with students. And just throughout like small encounters, you know, icebreakers, actual like content, having that question throughout makes it a much more fun process for them and for the people leading it. So that was like the main question I would like throw out there for y'all.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for bringing that up. Making sure that our curriculum is specifically targeted to a high school audience and not just, you know, a lecture-based approach for that we use in college. I think that'll be significant for making sure our impact is actually, you know, fruitful. We're actually trying to achieve what we're trying to achieve. That's definitely a good point to bring up, and we'll try our best, and we'll also try to reach out to high school administrators and high school students, as well as high school teachers, to make sure that we make this as best as it can be, to make sure that it will actually engage the students. Because the last thing we want is for this to be another boring activity that they're taking part in. We truly want it to be something that they can relate to and make meaningful.
I already hear that you guys sound like you're doing great about wanting to ask students questions, and it sounds like you already have like students as a priority.
Yeah, I think the game idea is actually really cool, and like if you do have like more information or like resources about that, it would be awesome if you could share them with us.
Cool. Yeah, try to.
Yeah, and that goes for everybody as well. If you guys have any ideas to add to this, that'd be really helpful, and we really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely.
And I have a question about more of like organizing the more on the organizational level. So you mentioned before you had a bit of trouble like getting people more involved and actually sticking to that project just for helping nonprofits. And now for future goals, I see you have, you know, pretty ambitious goals. So I'm trying to understand like what's your plan to balance multiple goals with, you know, the students currently also balancing multiple goals in their own lives, the college students, and tests and all that.
Yeah, I guess I think like yeah, you're right. Like our biggest issue probably is attrition. But like with the whole recruitment process, we're working on solving it to some extent. So like for example, our last recruitment cycle was, or not the last, the one before that was fall of like 2018, fall 2018. And so we recruited for like, we basically asked students to stick around for 2 quarters. Like that's when we didn't have the 3-quarter plan then, we were just doing 2 quarters. And like we only, I think, had like maybe 1 or 2 students actually leave. And then we had another recruiting session in the spring. And I think for the most part, most people from that recruiting session are still in the club. So like this like idea of like making expectations really clear just at the start is working to some extent. That being said, attrition will always kind of remain a problem on these projects. And like the one way that we're thinking about this is that there's just a lot of interest in the club. And so like, even though we lose a couple of people, there's like always people who are really excited to like start on these projects and work on them. And I think as time goes, like we will also get better at like picking people who are more likely to stick around. Like that's also something that we're trying to figure out, right? Like we're not like interview experts by any means. And so like I'm sure we miss out on people who are like more likely to stick around. So those are just like some of the things we're figuring out. But as we're doing that, we're also thinking on like a larger level, right? So like for example, the corporate partnerships thing, that goal, that's on the slide, the idea behind that is like we basically like partner with Microsoft right now, and we have access to their projects, and through that like we have access to like a bunch of their resources, right? So like Azure Cloud, like actual employees who work with us in terms of like, you know, just like imparting their knowledge in some way. And like if we could expand that to other tech companies, it's really big even for like getting students to work on these projects, because like not everybody is incentivized from like a social good aspect. A lot of people are also just incentivized from like, I'm getting a lot of really awesome experience and I'm working with like people from these big tech companies, right? So like I'm networking to some extent, which is fine. That's like a perfectly valid goal to have. And as long as like the project itself is focused towards social good, like the personal motivation is like the secondary factor there, right? So like we're trying to like appeal to all of these things in some way. And yeah, that's like kind of how like the broader goals fit in with like the current issues we have with our model, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, some of the other goals are like the influencing curriculum goal. So that's like a big thing, like students primarily learn through curriculum. And so there's like a couple of different things at UW for this specifically. We have a couple of like capstones where they're more focused on like making technology in the developing world, or like something similar to that. We also have like a discussion series where, by we, I mean like UW CSE in general, like not the club. So there's like a couple of different like seminars that people can join if they're interested in this kind of stuff. But like for the most part, we found that a lot of these like offerings are more towards like the graduate students or the faculty even, and they're not like undergrads are not a big part of these things. And like we want to change that in some way. Again, like influencing curriculum is like a hard goal, and it's definitely like something that's like a reach goal for now. We don't quite know how to go about that, but like we recognize that that's really important, and so like yeah, it's something that we want to work on. The networking platform is just like a way for people to meet like other people in the club, meet other people in the field, and kind of like find a way to work on projects by themselves, you know, like not just through Impact++. And like right now, this literally just looks like a Facebook group. But like the idea is that we're not like hoping to build out anything specifically, but like as the community grows and like as more people know about Impact++, the idea is like there's more collaboration that's not like directly facilitated by Impact++. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry to do this. We have to wrap up because it's almost time.
Oh no.
But if anyone has any like additional thoughts or questions, I think everyone has everyone's emails, so reach out to people directly if that's okay with everyone on the call. I know I also had a few questions, so I'll ask like Varshab, Sarah, and Shoria after the call as well. But yeah, this is great work that y'all are doing. I think everyone can agree on that. Thank you for your time and presenting, and for being a part of this session, everyone. We are going to close off now, but please, if you know additional people who would like to participate or even voice their opinions or share ideas on future video sessions, other entrepreneurs who would like to present, please connect them with us.